Aye.
Hello. In Ray's last segment, page 272 and 273 of In Search of Christian Freedom, Ray made the point that the Hebrew youths, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were all delivered by God supernaturally despite their political involvement.
Mm-hmm. And having pagan names and accepting them, the assigned names, answering to them.
Does God even care about their political involvement? It's not mentioned as being in any way a factor.
Yeah.
But what is mentioned is their loyalty when it came to worship.
Mm-hmm.
Same point made about Daniel now in the next paragraph. Ray says, I think of this when recalling some of the extreme measures witnesses have felt obliged to take to demonstrate strict neutrality, complete separateness from the world, primarily as a result of the organization's highly sensitizing them by its categorizing policies. There is an inordinate concern for how things will appear rather than what the reality is. In the modern state of Israel, witnesses who refused military service were imprisoned. They were issued military clothing to wear. Whatever the appearance may have been, the reality was that they were prisoners due to their stand. Nonetheless, they refused to wear the garments, and some even went around in their underclothes, rather than put on such clothing. One governing body suggestion was that they might wear it turned inside out to register their objection. Yet how much more is a name viewed as an identification than is a uniform? And Daniel's responding to the name Belteshazzar could not but come to mind. He knew that this appellative did not change what he was, and when a genuine issue arose, was willing to demonstrate what he was, though it meant facing death in a den of lions. That in Daniel chapter 6.
Where he still prays, worships God. Mm-hmm.
Had he been governed by Watchtower indoctrination and policy, he surely would have not displayed such a balanced, discerning viewpoint.
Somewhat related is the way in which the Watchtower organization now uses abstention from celebration of various holidays, or even birthdays, as evidence of superior righteousness. I still am not a celebrator of those holidays, yet I recognize that an exaggerated importance has been attached to them, with celebration or non-celebration being viewed as determining whether one is a practicer of pure worship or is worthy of disfellowshipment.
Much is made of the pagan origin of various practices and items connected with some of the holidays. Yet, realistically, any pagan significance they may once have had has long since disappeared. I remember in the 1970s giving a talk that discussed the need not to go overboard in these matters, pointing out, among other things, that the very days of the week in English involve the names of pagan objects of worship, the sun, the moon, and of the gods and goddesses, Twi, Woden, Thor, Fry, and Saturn. The same is true of many of the names of months. Yet today, we employ those names without the slightest thought of their pagan origin. Actually, most persons are totally unaware of their pagan source. This is similarly true of the various decorations and customs connected with many holidays.
While placing intense emphasis on the pagan origin factor, the Watchtower organization simply glosses over this in other areas, as in the use of wedding rings. Their own publication, What Has Religion Done for Mankind, in 1951, pages 276 and 277, quotes Catholic Cardinal Newman as saying that, along with such things as the use of temples, incense, candles, etc., the ring of marriage is among those things that are of pagan origin and sanctified by their adoption into the church. Yet almost all of Jehovah's Witnesses use the ring in marriage, something their own publication reveals as of pagan origin.
By the way, this quote, which is a direct quote, of pagan origin, sanctified by their adoption into the church, that's a quote from John Henry Newman, Newman's most famous book, Essay on the Development of Christian Doctrine. You may have noticed if you watched the news this week, Newman was just made an official saint. canonized, as they call it, made a saint of the Catholic Church. And he was a convert from Anglicanism who thought of Anglicanism as somehow contaminated by Protestantism and became a Catholic, and then finally a Catholic cardinal in response to his conversion and outstanding abilities. But obviously Newman's point of view is not the Protestant, the classic Protestant point of view. And Ray Franz seems to be somewhere caught in between here. He won't do what so-called evangelical Christians will do, or what Catholics will do in the area of holidays or in the area of politics. He says on the previous page he won't get personally involved in these things, but he won't judge them either.
Yeah, he seems to think the importance is exaggerated.
Yeah.
You know, that it's not an issue that needs to be addressed particularly.
And yet you don't know when you're a witness that there was a time back in the 1930s apparently when the Watchtower seriously contemplated
Changing their calendar.
changing the whole calendar, getting rid of these pagan days, pagan months.
Yeah. But
Giving
then
them new
I
names.
guess making appointments would be pretty difficult. If you change the names of all the weeks, days of the week and months.
So apparently saner minds prevailed at Brooklyn headquarters in those days anyway.
Yeah.
But the principle's still there. Like, okay, who makes the rule then? If a ring is not impure because it's pagan, and a month is not impure because it has a pagan god attached to it.
And it's because they're picking and choosing which ones they want to say are wrong as well. You know, so some things like this wedding ring is I don't think most witnesses would think twice about that. It's just a symbol that you're married.
And you're not encouraged to think twice about it, as if it's a conscience issue.
Yeah. Even the idea of pagan being evil, like where do we get it from? It's not like there's a statement in the Bible, everything that's pagan is evil.
No, it's in the ancient world, pagan is more of a description than it is a judgment, a moral judgment. It means it's not got kind of the official stamp of civilized life. It's more like barbaric or rude.
Yeah. And even this point that you just mentioned about Newman saying that it was more or less sanctified by being adopted by the church. In some ways, you can see that in the Old Testament they were doing that as well.
Yeah.
By God setting up certain festivals that they were commanded that they should celebrate. But there were such celebrations going on with their neighbors.
Spring festival.
But they weren't being sanctioned, if you like, as this is a time of reflection of the blessing of God, like the harvest and.
Well, they were commonly that. They were thought to be celebrations and thankfulness towards whatever deity, right? But the fact that they were used by pagans.
Yeah, but not tying it to their creator, whereas that's what the Hebrews did.
But the fact that the pagans did it didn't disqualify the Hebrews from having a spring festival and a fall festival.
Yeah.
And similarly, what we don't recognize when we're Jehovah's Witnesses is that even the names of God. Yes, it's true, Yahweh is the distinctive covenant name of God, but he has other names in the Old Testament. Elohim is one. That was shared with pagan gods. El is the highest deity of the Canaanites, and they were the most pagan, the most hated, and the most ungodly of pagan civilizations. But still, their god El became one of the names of the true God, Yahweh. Elohim is the long form of that. And the name Baal too. The name Baal is used in the Old Testament of both the false gods and of Jehovah. It's just the common Semitic word for Lord. So the Baals is usually the form in which we find it. The Baals, the Lords.
Yeah, so it's not really the use of them, it's the meaning that matters, like what meaning you put to it.
Right, but the name itself, or the title if you prefer, is not contaminated because it's used in a pagan context. Ray goes on analyzing the legalism of the Watchtower, in specifically the application of rules about birthdays and personal celebrations that the rest of the world thinks are just ridiculous. And the fact that we should have a rule that results in people being shunned by their fellow believers, even their family members. The world sees this as legalism gone berserk. And when you're an ex-witness, you realize, yes, it in effect became just one more thing to separate you.
Yeah, it's a distinction to make you different than everyone else. So it got you persecuted, and we want to be persecuted because then we can say we're the true
I'm
people.
afraid that is the truth.
Mm.